right. The issue that we had been dealing with up until now is a whole discussion, a long discussion that we've had over several Mamorim about the status of the nature of the kav and where does the kav, what's the shorish of the kav. And according to the Shita, the shorish of the kav is the sefiros hagenuzos, which is the 10 sefiros in the orange soft before the tzimtzum. And then there's the tzimtzum, and they become, the sefiros hagenuzos become revealed, and that's the shorish of the kav. Now again, the kav is oyer. So what we're saying is that there is a hagbola in the or itself. According to the Ramak, there was no hagbola in the or. According to the Ramak, the hagbola in the or came about, initially there was no hagbola in the or. The hagbola in the or comes about only through the slapshus of the or in kalim. That's when, in other words, when it hits the kli, that's when the or becomes, the way he put it, in a blue kli, the or becomes blue, and a red kli, the or becomes red, so on and so forth. Our result does not hold from the shita. The result says that the appropriate or went into the appropriate kli because the or was already mugbal before the kalim. And by the way, the shorish of the kalim is the reshimo. It's the shorish of the hagbola in the kav. That's the sefiros hagenuzos. And if anyone has any questions or whatever, then please feel free to stop me. I think you can also unmute yourself if you want to, but you can always just type in the chat. There's a type a message in the chat. It's also possible. Okay, so according to what we explained, then the sefiros hagenuzos became revealed. They were bottled in the Or Ein Sof before the tzimtzum, and with the tzimtzum they became revealed. So the Arizal asks a very important question in Eitz Chaim. He asked the following question: why could it not have been that simply the or that was not shaykh to the kav would be removed and leave the or of the kav? Why did you have to have siluka or and then hamshochas hakav after that? Chazar v'heir, as the Loshen goes in Eitz Chaim. Chazar v'heir, he returned and was meir oyer in the form of the kav, an or mugbal. So why was there not simply a removal of the or that was not necessary now, and just leave the or kav? Now the Rebbe, the Rebbe Rasha points out that this question really is only shaykh if you maintain that the or hakav is an or that comes from the sefiros hagenuzos, but it doesn't apply if you think it comes directly from the or or whatever. Anyway, so the question remains: why was there siluka or? And he answered, his tirutz was that the this was for the sake. It was for the sake of the kalim, not for the sake of creating the kalim, which were actually created from the reshimo, but for the sake of not having the kalim bottle. All right, let me tell this fellow I can't talk to him. Sorry about that. Good friend of mine. Rafael, I'm in the middle of a shir. I can't talk right now. I'll call you later, Leonardo. Okay, cool. Okay, so sorry about that. So, oh, someone's waiting to get into the room. Here we go. Okay. Okay, so his answer was that it's for the sake of the kalim, not to create the kalim. The tzimtzum, but ba'ofen shel siluk was for the sake of the kalim. Yes, it's true. It could have been that the or that was not the or of the kav could have been removed, but then the kalim would have not been able to exist. They would have become bottle. They would have been misbatlim in the or because of the whatever or was left in the after the tzimtzum. Had it not been in a way of siluk, a complete removal of the or, whatever or would have been left, there would have still been or ein sof, even though it would have been changed somewhat by the tzimtzum, but it would still be ein sof, and therefore the kalim would have not have been able to exist, and that's why the tzimtzum had to be bebechinus siluk or, a complete removal of the or. Okay. We're now about to start chapter 19. I believe it is. Yeah, chapter 19. Okay, let me just get the text on my screen over here. Here we are. Now, if you're following on in your own sefer, that's fine. Just you'll be able to see where I'm up to if you need to, if you lose the place or whatever. Okay, Va'inyan, whom the explanation is as follows: the Hinin is Ba'al Perek Tezvo. We explained before in chapter 15. The B'Shorosh Makor HaKav, in the root of the Kav, in the source of the Kav, Kamosh Kalam Orein Sof, as it is in the Orein Sof, Yesham Eses Sefiros. There's Eses Sefiros in the Or itself. Vayin Eses Sefiros hagenuzos b'ma'atzilon, and these are what are called the Eses Sefiros hagenuzos b'ma'atzilon in the Loshan of Sefer Yetzirah. Eses Sefiros hagenuzos, the sefiros that are concealed in the Ma'atzil, in the Emanator, in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in the Orein Sof, in other words. Ve'inyan she'hen genuzos v'ne'elamois, and this concept that they are hidden and ne'elam, concealed, Orein Sof. There's usually a difference between ganuz and ne'elam. Ganuz means just that they're hidden there, but ne'elam means they're covered over. It's sort of a much more of a deliberate act of concealment. It's not just that they're not visible, which would be gnuzois, but more that they're concealed, ne'elamos. But over here, he doesn't make this an important distinction. He uses these terms over here as more or less synonymous. So, va'im shehein gnuzois v'ne'elamos bo'orein sof, shehein klulim u'yichadim boy, that these eses gnuzois are really part of the oir. Before the tzimtzum, they're part of the oir. It's just an aspect, another aspect of the oir. Shehein klulim u'yichadim boy. They're not an independent existence. They don't exist on their own. They're only in the oir. So, that you could recognize them as an independent or a separate existence. The Metzias Chochma Ubina as the existence of Chochma, the existence of Bina. In the Or Ein Sof, it's not like that. In the Or Ein Sof, Kulam Klulim Yachad, as he'll explain, they're all included all together, and you can't make any distinction between one aspect of the Or and the other aspect of the Or. There's no Chochma and Bina there, in other words. Va'ena Mosifim Shum Ribui, and they don't add any multiplicity, Chas v'Sholem, B'Or Ein Sof Baruch Hu. There's no multiplicity in Or Ein Sof. Now, just note that he's saying there's no multiplicity even in the Or Ein Sof, in the Ein Sof himself, in HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, beyond his galus of himself, beyond his revelation of himself, which is his revelation of himself, that's the Or Ein Sof. But as he is in himself, the Or Ein Sof, as he is in himself, the Ein Sof, that inyan is obviously clear to everybody that there's no possible concept of ribui. Ein oid milvado, there's only him, that's all there is. Mitzad atzmus. But you might think that in the Or there maybe in the Or there might be some distinctions, and there might be madregas, and there might be sefiros, so to speak, in the Or. He says no. There's no multiplicity in the Or Ein Sof. Even though there are sefiros that are bottled there, but nevertheless, it doesn't make any multiplicity, and he's going to give a motion for it soon. In fact, right now. Nefesh, just like the nefesh of a person, so the nefesh has different koichos. There's the koich hiluch, there's the koich ha'iyah, there's koich hashmiya, there's the koich ha'seichel, and so on and so forth. But it's all you. It's not somebody else. It's not one person doing the thinking and a different person doing the walking, and a different person doing the smelling and a different person doing the talking. It's all the same person, right? It's all me. And therefore, the same thing is true of the Eibishter. Afal pi, that all these koichos are there, nevertheless, echadhu, just like the nefesh is achas. So too, just like it is in the nefesh, kol shekain v'kal v'chomer, it is in the Or Ein Sof. And this is even true in the shorish of the kalim. The shorish of the kalim, not even the shorish of the oiris, but the shorish of the kalim, shorish kalim. And again, the root of the kalim, where do the kalim come from? The kalim come from the reshimo, the Kalim Bepoil come from the Rishimo after the Tzimtzum. What about the Rishimo? Where was the Rishimo before the Tzimtzum? The Rishimo before the Tzimtzum was in the Or Ein Sof. It was the Oisius, it's called the Oisius of the Rishimo in the Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum. The letters, which later on go on to create the Kalim. Now, let me just explain this concept a little bit. There's a very fascinating Maimorim on this this concept of the Rishimo. The Rebbe that speaks about it more than anybody else is the Rebbe Maharash. I'll be that there's a little bit from the Alter Rebbe. It's mostly the Rebbe Maharash that talks about it, and then it's picked up later on by the Rebbe Rashab, who explains it in even more detail. But the first one that really spoke about it was the Rebbe Maharash. In any event, he explains that the concept of the Rishimo is the oisius in the Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum. Now, what does that mean? So we have to take a derech moshel. A person has a machshava, he has a thought. Right now, the thought has not yet been expressed in words, but nevertheless, the thought has certain parameters to the thought. Those parameters to the thought would be called the letters of the thought. They're not the letters of speech, but they're the letters of thought on a much higher level than the letters of speech, incomparably higher than the letters of speech, which are very limited. But the letters of thought are nevertheless some kind of natural, let's call it a power of, it's the power of Gvul in the Or. It's the Koyach HaGvul that there is in the Or Ein Sof. Since HaKadosh Baruch Hu has, obviously, Koyach Bebilti Baal Gvul, he has a Koyach of the infinite, he has a power of infinitude. So too, he has a power of finitude. What's the power of finitude? That's called the Koyach HaGvul, the power of finitude, the Koyach HaGvul. Now, the Koyach HaGvul before the Tzimtzum is completely bottled in the Or Ein Sof. It's a potential. It doesn't actually exist yet as a metzius. It's completely bottled. But what happens with the histalkus or when the or is removed during the process of Tzimtzum, the Rishimo becomes revealed. The oisis of the Rishimo become revealed. They remain. And the oisis of the Rishimo, the Rebbe Maharash explains, lo naga bahem hatzimtzum. The Tzimtzum didn't actually affect them. It affected what was around them. It removed the or that was causing them to be completely not recognizable and completely not extant, existent, however you want to say it, because they were completely bottled in the or. When that or was removed, then they remained, they were untouched by the Tzimtzum itself. In other words, the Tzimtzum didn't reduce this power of Gvul at all in any way. The Tzimtzum did reduce the power Habli Gvul, but it didn't reduce the power of Gvul. It's a very interesting concept and has to do very much with the whole concept of mitzvahs and so on, and why mitzvahs are of such great importance. So we're not going to go into it now because it's not the subject, but in any event, there's a lot to talk about over there. In any event, okay. So the Gmor Kain Hu Gam B'Shorsh HaKelim. So too was it with the Shorsh HaKelim, which is the Koach HaGvul, the Rishimo in Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum. They're not there as a Metzias. They're not identifiable as independent or independent might be the wrong word, as what's the word I'm looking for? Anybody know? Let me just get the chat going here. I don't have the chat.
Entities.
Yeah, okay, entities. They're not individual entities. Yes, good. They're not individual entities. Independent makes it sound like they don't depend on the Or Ein Sof. Of course they do, but they're not individual entities as such. That's right. Okay, you do a konoida, as we know, the oisis harashimo, which is the koach havu, we just said that's shosha kelim. Konoida, the oisis harashimo, moshe in korma tzimtum, as they are prior to the tzimtum, einan b'metzias oisis klal. They're not in the aspect of letters. It's just, so to speak, that we compare them to the letters afterwards, just as the letters of speech must have a shorish in the letters, so to speak, of thought. So too, the kalim later on have their shorish in the oisius harashimu, even though the oisius, as they are before the tzimtzum, are not oisius. Yadua b'maimer, as is known in the what it says in the Zohar, galif galifu b'tehiru ilo. He carved out, or he engraved would be a better word. He engraved letters in the Or Ein Sof, but Tehiru Ilah in the supernal Or Ein Sof. He carved letters in the Or Ein Sof, and it's explained in many Maimorim that the inyan of engraving letters is that you don't remove any of the body of what it is that you're engraving. Let's say you're engraving a piece of silver or you're engraving a piece of gold, right? You don't actually remove any of the gold in order to make the engraving. The engraving is done by taking the equivalent of a needle, I guess it would be, an engraving needle, and making little dots, or making letters or whatever it is that you want to put into the whatever it is that you're engraving there, and those form without taking away any of they're fixed into the gold or they're fixed into the silver, and they're recognizable as letters now, but they're engraved there. What the concept that we want to take out is they part and parcel of the Or itself. It's not an addition to the Or, and it's not a subtraction from the Or. They're part and parcel of the Or, just like the letters engraved in a piece of metal would be part and parcel of that piece of metal. Okay. That's all talking about engraving the letters. How much more so the Shorsha HaOiros? We just spoke about the Shorsha HaKelim, which is the Rishimo. How much more so the Shorsha HaOiros? They don't have any existence at all. At least the Shorish of the Kalim is Koach HaGvul. So therefore, you would expect there to be some kind of limitation. Even though it's Mineu Bay, it's part and parcel of whatever it is that it's carved into the Or Ein Sof before the Tzimtzum. How much more so the Shorish of the Or? The Shorashim of the Or, in other words, the sefiros hagenuzos, aber b'chinas blima. They don't have any muhus. They don't have any definable existence that we can point to. Okay, umemela, accordingly, automatically move on. She'ein bahem is cholkus. There's no division. There's no separation between the oisias. Yos chochma sfira levada or bina sfira levada. You don't have bina as one entity, and chochma is a different entity, and the various sefiros are different entities. You don't have that. They're all together, all meld into one another, all merge into one another as one thing, so to speak. That since their etzem, their essential existence of being, the essential being is that they're not a metzias, they're not an limited existence. Therefore, they are all mixed together. They're all mixed together. And you could take this, for example, you could take this as, if you want to do a little experiment for yourselves, you could sort of think of an image in your mind, right? And then describe the image to yourself. Let's say you have the image of a candle, just coming up to Hanukkah, you have the image of a candle in your mind. So that image of the candle, in order to be able to describe it clearly, it's going to take you quite a few oisias. Now, all those oisias that you're going to use to describe the candle's made out of whatever. It's made out of oil, and it's made out of a wick, and there's a fire, and there's different colors in the fire, and this and that. Yeah, the way you're going to describe that candle is all implicit in the candle, in the image of the candle itself, right? It's all implicit in the image of the candle, and so too we're saying that all of these things, the description that will come out later on of the lights of the oiros as discrete entities, that's the word I was looking for, discrete entities later on as discrete sefirot, that was all contained as one image, so to speak, like the image of a candle contains all of the descriptions thereof. So too, all of the sefirot were sort of one thing. They were part of one image, so to speak, one thought in Hashem's mind. Okay, that's what we mean by iru v'hisachtus. In order to be able to understand them more clearly, how could it be that there's sefiros v'yesh bahem madregas hofchim, and there are opposite qualities in the sefiros, k'mo chesed u'gvura chug, shehen k'mo eish u'mayim, that there's eish and fire and water, so and v'chein chug, chub. The same thing is true with chochma and bina. Let's just discuss Chesed and Gevura first. So he's asking the question over here as follows. If you want to say that they will all be Iruv, right? We're all Ba'achtus. They're all in one melded harmony together, and you couldn't distinguish one sphere from another. So how could you have opposite sefiros? How could you have Chesed and Gevura? Two opposite things. Aish and Mayim, they're opposites. L'chorei, there would have been opposites there too. And the same thing is true of Chochmah and Bina. Chochmah is a Nakuda, Bina is Hispashtus a Nakuda. Right? Chochmah is one single point, Bina is a whole framework around that point. Also opposites. So how could it be that you could have opposite sefiros forming one single entity? All right, so he's going to explain. Each sphera, each midah, each quality in itself, each koyach in itself is absolutely powerful. But toikav yoiser, it's in Or Ein Sof. It has the koyach of Or Ein Sof. So how could they be included one within the other? How does that work? The truth is that we can't really grasp it clearly. We can't really grasp how it is clearly. Why? Because in our world you don't have that. In our experience you don't have that so much either. But we can see, and we perceive, and we feel, we're aware. In our minds, we perceive in our minds, and we can feel that it's true. That there must be bis achtus. Why? Because there's no multiplicity. It's a klal in Torah. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. So that therefore there can't be any multiplicity, not in him and not in his galus of himself, not in his revelation of himself, which is Or Ein Sof. There can't be any multiplicity. It has to be bis achtus. How exactly that happens? It's beyond our intellectual capacities to understand. Okay. And we could perhaps say, so even though it's beyond our capacity to understand, the Rebbe Rashab here is going to definitely try and understand this and communicate what he understands to us as well. And we could say the inyan ha'hofchius hu rak b'hispashtus hadavar. Maybe we could say that the hofchius, that the opposite qualities of Eish and Mayim, of Chesed and Gevura, of Chochmah and Bina, of the Nakuda and the Hispashtus, are only in the Hispashtus, and only when the actual sefiros express themselves outside, so to speak, when they're mispashet, when they're no longer in the Or Ein Sof, and then we sort of extrapolate it inwards. That later on it comes out as a tziyur mugbal, comes out as a limited entity, a limited thing, each sphera. And it has a different tziyur than the other sphera. Chesed has a different tziyur from Gevura, and Chochmah has a different tziyur from Bina, and so on. But the essence of it doesn't come in a tziyur yet. And therefore, ein sham in hofchis, and therefore over there, there's not, you don't have this whole concept of opposites, of one thing opposite the other, chesed opposed to gevura, and gevura opposed to chesed. And just like we would say with eish and mayim, she'eish cham v'hamayim kar. When is it that true that fire is hot and water is cold, and therefore harayim hofchim zeh mizeh? They're opposite one to the other. Hot and cold are two opposites. And at this point, it's impossible for them to mix together. Why? Because because if they do get mixed together, then one overpowers the other. In other words, the heat will eventually cause the water to evaporate, or the water will eventually put out the fire, right? The water will put out the fire, as he says that the water will cause the water to evaporate, or mayim mechabenes ha'esh, or the water will put out the fire. When does that happen? That only happens bispashtus. That happens when the water and the fire and the water are bispashtus, when they're spreading out. And that's when they have their tziyur. They have a certain limitation of this is hot and that's cold. Fire is hot and water is cold. But that's only in the spashtus. That's only when they are as a unique entity. But when they are in their source, as the yesoidos of Asian Mayim, then it's not like that. What's the yesoid of Asian Mayim? Yesoid means like the fundamental element, as you probably know in the Rambam, and before the time of the Rambam, Afilu Chazal spoke about their four elements: earth, water, fire, air, and a fifth one, ether. But the four elements are not four actual things. When you say earth, we don't mean a clod of earth. We just mean properties of earthiness, right? In other words, it has mass, what we would today call mass, right? And water would be that which flows, and fire would be they have some other, like today we would have some scientific different definition of it, heat or whatever, right? Temperature. Nothing in the universe, if it reached absolute zero, if it had no temperature at all, would just collapse. That's according to science. So there must be some heat somewhere, even if it's minimally more than absolute zero. Okay, so these concepts are they've taken upon a new form, a new language, but these concepts are variation concepts as well. Okay, so when we're talking about them as fundamental properties, like fundamental elements, as they were called, elemental properties, then fire wasn't hot, and water wasn't flowing, and earth wasn't heavy, and so on and so forth, because it's a conceptual thing, right? The concept of gravity doesn't weigh anything. Gravity is a property of objects which weigh something, but the concept of gravity doesn't weigh anything, right? The concept of heat doesn't make anything hot, and so on. So that's what he explains. By etzem hayesoid, in the essential yesoid, in the elemental form that it was harenoida da esha yesoidi, the fundamental property of fire, enocham. It doesn't have any heat in it. It's not heat itself. The concept of heat doesn't have heat. Because if it did, it would burn up the world, because the concept of heat is found everywhere. And since heat is, if we're talking about a fundamental property, it would have been, therefore, had the property of pure heat, so to speak. If it would have been hot, it would have burned up everything. And so on with all the other yisoids. Similarly, the fundamental property, or the element of water, doesn't have coldness to it. Because they are, therefore, if they would be essentially like this, they would have been drawn down to be a metzius in action, so to speak, as it is. Just 1 second here. Sorry, I thought someone was trying to get in. Okay. As they are in essence. In other words, if these fundamental properties, these fundamental elements, would have had the properties which later are attributed to them, the property of heat, the property of core, and so on and so forth, of coldness, then they wouldn't be able to exist at all. They would not only would they not be able to exist together, each one would, so to speak, prevail against the other, and the world would fall apart. Everything would be, all of existence would fall apart. So for sure, there wouldn't have any connection between them. Again, there There would be no connection between them at all. Mikol makom, moshein ba'atzmutan, as they are in their essence, ba'atzmutan. There's no cold and hot over there, or hot and cold over there. Okay, and therefore, and therefore, it could be that they could mix. It's not impossible for them to mix one or the other, because this is not hot and that's not cold, and therefore they don't oppose each other. So what? How does this his arvus work? How does this mixture of things work? How does it work bepoil? So he's going to explain. It's not that fire is included in water and water is included in fire. No, it doesn't work like that. These are disparate and different properties, but they don't oppose each other. Again, they're not included in one another, but rather that they just simply reside together without being affected by one another. Water is not an independent or a separate quality, and Ash is not a separate quality. They reside in the same place. They exist in the same space, so to speak. But nevertheless, he says this is, if we explain that it's only the Hispashtus that they're different, but in their essence they're not different. But this is that we understand the difference between the opposite qualities of water and fire, and therefore we can't grasp it in any other way. And we deny that could be in the koiches atzmi. But the point is, we can't really understand it fully in its full meaning as the way it is up above. Why? Because we're limited creatures and we can't really understand that. And the Ika concept is the inyan ha'hofchivus urak behispashus hadavar sh'utziu hadavar, is only in the outer limits of the thing, the hispashtus thereof, as it spreads out, but not as it is in its essence, as it is in the spread, so to speak, because that's where the tziur happens. That's where the form of it happens, and then you can get opposites. But in the essential quality of heat and of chesed and gvura, of heat and cold, etc., as they are in the yesoidos, there's no opposition of one to the other. The etzem b'yosa mushlal, and the essence, since it is negated from any tziur, there's no shape, there's no form, there's no limitation. Even though this is called koach ha'esh, that's called koach ha'mayim, they can dwell together. Why? Because they're not opposites there in essence. Okay. So to just go back to what we were talking about, we were talking about the achdus of the various sefiros of sefiros hagenuzos. All right, so I was going to explain this further. And we gave an example of that from the elemental properties of fire and water, etc. Even in Adam Kadmoin, and in Akudim. Now, Akudim is a lower aspect of Adam Kadmoin. There's Akudim, Nikudim, and Brudim are all part of Adam Kadmoin. Akudim is 10 oiros in one kli. That's Akudim. Nikudim is 10 oiros in 10 kalim, and that became Olam HaToihu. And Brudim is Olam HaTzilus. Yeah, Brudim is Olam HaTzilus. All right. Sharagam b'chinas Ak, even in Adam Kadmoin, Begam b'chinas Akudim, and even in Akudim, which is on a lower madrega, it's within Ak. It's a madrega within Ak. Harekulam Akudim b'kli echad. All of them are all the oiros are in one kli. How could it be if they oppose each other? They don't oppose each other because they're too high a madrega to oppose each other. It's only in the hispashtus, but not in the etzem, that they oppose each other, that they're opposites. How much more so if in the world of Adam Kadmoin, and one of the madregas in Adam Kadmoin called Akudim, it's like that 10 oiros in one kli. How much more so in Adam Kadmoin, in Or Ein Sof itself? Okay, let's continue. Vayikahu, and the main concept is as follows. Lefish and bechinas metzius, because they're not a metzius, and therefore, since they're not a metzius, they're not. There's no opposition, and therefore there's no multiplicity over there. Come on, or as mufshat, as we have when we're talking about a concept that is mufshat. Mufshat means that it's very theoretical. Right? It's in the world of theory, right? It's not. It's divorced from reality. That's what mufshat means, divorced from reality. Okay, sheyuchal yisarei v'mor seichel hofchi mimenu. That it could be again, ora seichel mufshat sheyuchal yisarei v'mor seichel hofchi mimenu. It could mix with another seichel which is its opposite, because it's mufshat, because it's completely in the theoretical realms. It doesn't exist as a metzius. Okay. And he gives an example of this. Just like two chachomim who grasp a concept from their one concept, let's say from their teacher. He's going to use this moshel later on. Hillel and Shammai. Hillel and Shammai both receive from Avtalion, right? They receive from Shmaya and Avtalion, but let's just say from Avtalion for now. Hillel and Shammai both received from Avtalion. What they received was the same teaching from Avtalion. But Hillel took it in a way of chesed, and Shammai took it in a way of gvura. How could that possibly be? Because it was such a mufshat concept, it could be melubash, it could become clothed in the or of chesed or in the or of gvura. Let's say not the or, but the kli of chesed or the kli of gvura. It could go either way because it was a mufshat concept. Again, they grasp one idea that they got from the teacher. Hillel grasped it this way, and Shammai grasped it the other way. When they say the seichel according to their understanding, according to their chokhmah, ha'atzmi, their essential chokhmah, that the essential chokhmah does not have a tziur. It is completely in the realm of theoretical. It doesn't have, it's not the ispashtus as it is in its etzem, as it is in its essence. The depth of the concept. And this sage and that sage, when they say the essential concept as they receive it from the teacher, you're not going to see any difference between Hillel and Shammai. Because in the original concept, it could go in this form, it could go in that form. Both possibilities are there. But as it is in the thought itself, there's no opposites. There's no two opposites. Later on, it'll come out as two opposites. And therefore, the two things could be mixed together, the two shittas. And the chachomim themselves that know the concept in its depth and the inner dimensions of this concept, the chachomim become separated from one another, and they understand. In other words, one takes it away of gvura, one takes it away of chesed, and they have different shittas, right? They have different shittas, and they understand how these different shittas apply in the essence of the thing. In other words, Hillel could see, even though he didn't agree with, but he could see Shammai's position, and Shammai could see Hillel's position in the original svara. But they didn't take it that way because they took it down to a low madrega, into a practical madrega. In the practical madrega, it was not two opposites. I'm sorry, in the practical madrega, it was two opposites, whereas in the original source, it was just one thing. Right? But in the galus of in other words, in the original grasp of that idea, the difference between Hillel and Shammai was not visible. It was only in the hispashtus when they actually came to paskin how it applies in this world. And therefore, the concept could be comprised of both possible elements. But when this concept comes into the garments of thought, in other words, the levushim are what are going to make Hillel different from Shammai. Then you can see the differences between them. See the difference between Hillel and Shammai. In the original concept, you could see both of them contained within there, but no difference between them, because they're all applying the same principle over there. But when it comes down into Chesed, Gvura, when it comes down to Shammai, Hillel, Shammai, then obviously there's going to be differences between them. One's going to grasp it one way, and one's going to grasp it another way. When you get a seichel hiyuli, this word hiyuli is a very important word. Hiyuli is actually from a word meaning oir. When the concept is on the madrega of oir, there's a pasuk in Eoif where Eoif says, Behilo neiroi alai roishi. Behilo means a lotion of or. It's one of the I think 7 lashonas of or in the Torah. There's or, there's tohar, there's behilo. So it's one of the lashonas of or, but it's a lotion of or which is like it's a lofty lotion of or, and therefore when the or is in a state of hiyuli, halal actually also comes from that word halal. In any event, or seichel hiyuli, when it's in a state of hiyuli, it could come down this way, it could come down that way, it could come down the other way. In other words, you could apply the same mathematical formula, so to speak, and if we take a marshal, the same mathematical formula can apply to different problems. You can use it in different contexts. Once it's in that particular context, then it takes upon itself the form of that context. And the same thing would be true of koyach hiyuli. The koyach hiyuli could take on many different forms, but when it's in this form or it's in that form, it's used in different ways. Moshe's Ba'aleel, being in Shammai V'Hillel, Shekiblu, Shnei Mirav Echad, they received both of them from one Rav, from Avtalio, and from Shmaya. But in any event, B'chol Zeh, Yuvan Inyan Dugma B'Orein Sof Baruch Hu, we can understand the similarity in Orein Sof. Dimi Yosh Yesh Sham B'chinas Chochma Ubina, even though in the sefiros hagenuzos, which is what we're talking about, there's chochma and bina, nekuda and ispashtus, chesed and gvura, which is seem to be two opposites. Nevertheless, because they don't have an actual metzius, they don't have actual practical limitations. We are only talking about in the madrega of machshava, and the madrega of oyer, and the drag of or in sof. Therefore, they're completely amalgamated one with the other. And the moshel can be understood from koychas nefesh. That for sure in the etzem nefesh of a person, all of the koychas of a nefesh are found there. There's shmiya, there's re'iyah, there's ta'am, the ability to taste, and so on. They're all one as part of the etzem nefesh. But when they come into revelation, then every koyach comes into its own kli. In other words, the re'iyah comes to the ayin, shmiya comes to the ear, tam comes to the mouth to taste, and so on, and so it is. Chochma goes into the moach chochma, the right brain. Bina is revealed in the left brain, and re'iyah is revealed in the eye. But as they are, these koychas on the etzem nefesh, they're all together, right? They all reside in the same place, so to speak, and they don't contradict each other. And even though they are different koychas, there's differences between them. Obviously, chochma is not bina, bina is not chochma. Chesed is chesed, not gvura. They move dalim zeh mizeh. Zeh b'chinas eish, v'zeh b'chinas mayim. This one's fire, that one's water. Mikom makom harem kulam b'yachad. In their original source, they're all one. They're all there together. Because over there they're in the absolute state of pristine purity and spirituality, spirit, so to speak. It's on the madrega of ruach. It's not on the madrega of ruchnius, in other words. It's not the madrega of gashmius, where there would be differences. Therefore, none of that opposition is found there at all, as they are when they are revealed. And they're not recognizable over there, And therefore they can all dwell together, and there's no opposition between one and another. And so we can understand with sefiros hagenuzos. Even though later on, when the oiros are melubash in kalim, this is chesed that gvura. They're separated from one another. They're different from one another. They manifest in completely different ways. But when they're in the Or Ein Sof, Baruch Hu, they're on a completely how shall you say, refined level, and on a level of complete ruchnius, spirituality, and therefore there's no opposition between them. They're completely different from there they would be afterwards. And therefore there's no division between them, each on its own. They're included as one. And therefore, now comes the interesting part. When the Torah was given, that the Gilui came from above Hishtalshlus, Milamalim Hishtalshlus. Whenever you in his Galas Koichas Atzmi, and then the Neshama, it would be in the union of the revelation of the Etzem, the essential Koichas of the Neshama. In other words, the Madrega of Neshama, that's much higher than the Neshama as it is in the Guf, but in the essence of the Neshama. There, you could see, it says the Pasuk is Roim es HaKoilos. That's how it goes. They saw the voices. They saw the voice of Hashem. How could they see? So some of the Mefarshim just say, no, it means that they saw what they saw and they heard what they heard. But the Gemara and for sure in Sifrei Pnimius HaTorah explain, no, they saw what was normally heard and they heard what was normally seen. There was, I think it's called synthesia. I think it's called in English, synthesia. In other words, the koiches got mixed up. They saw through they saw through the ears and they heard through the eyes, so to speak. Right? They saw what was normally, they heard what was normally seen, and they saw what was normally heard. How you roes anishma v'shem nisanire. Because there was no distinction between Shmiya and Re'iyah. That was the level of it was on the level of oil, and therefore there was no distinction, there was no separation between Shmiya and Re'iyah, and therefore they saw what they normally heard, and they heard what they normally saw. All right, we're going to skip the bracket for now. We're going to come back to the bracket next week because the bracket is quite a long digression, and we want to keep with the theme, and next week's parak is quite short, so we'll be able to come back to the it's a pilpul in the concept of Iskalulus HaKoiches. It goes further into the Inyan. We'll do it next week, Mitzvah Hashem. So as far as this is concerned, when they heard what was seen and they saw what was heard, the sight and the hearing of the neshama before it was clothed in the body, in other words, before it had physical ears and physical eyes, that there in the neshama it's called grasping or comprehending the essence of something, and understanding comprehending the essence of something. It's seeing the essence of a thing and comprehending the essence of the thing. Like the neshamas doing Gan Eden, except perhaps on a lower madrega. Gan Eden is already a lower madrega than it is in the essence of the neshama. In any event, this is all in ora hishtalshlus, ora elokis. That's the aura that comes into Islapshus, that comes into enclosement in the world. In other words, there's Shmiya and there's Re'iyah. But in the Neshama itself, before it comes down to the world, it has both koiches, and both koiches are not a steer one to the other. There's actually a Geshmaka story that I heard from somebody about a Dayan, someone on the Beis Din, one of the judges on the Beis Din in Yerushalayim. He was a big joker. He started losing his hearing, and eventually became deaf. Had to wear hearing aids and so on and so forth. So somebody asked him, it said, they were joking, obviously, and they said to him, Hashoichet Ya'aver. When you take shoichat, bribery, when you take a bribe, it makes a person blind. It blinds a dayan, blinds the judges. If they take bribery, it's going to blind them. In other words, it's going to blind them to the truth. It's going to blind them to who's innocent and who's guilty, and so on and so forth. But he's making a joke. He said, "You went deaf, and but you took a bribe, and you should have gone blind." It was only a joke, obviously. So I said, "Yeah, you're right, but they only promised and they didn't give. I only promised the bribe, they didn't give it." So I went deaf instead. That was the, okay, let's continue. Ubatzilus yesh loymar, in Atzilus you could say, shezeu rak ba'oras ma'oras ha'atzilus, v'lo be'etzem ha'or. Only in the aura of the or, in other words, the radiance of the or of Atzilus, would there be his chalkus, would there be any divisions, and you could have chesed, gvura, etc., but not in the essence of the or. V'lo be'etzem ha'or, ma'ach sheyatzav nifredu ma'kelim. It's only after the or goes in other words, in the world of Atzilus itself, there's Achdus. When the or of Atzilus goes outside of Atzilus, then there's his chalkus, then there's divisions. Even in Atzilus. Well, Etzem or, but they're Klal or in so, but the Etzem or, for sure. If this is so, even in Atzilus, the Etzem or, but they're Klal or in so, Shalamалми Islam elements, and the or that doesn't come into it, it's not clothed in any of the worlds, it's higher than all of the worlds, or before the Tzimtzum, over there we can only have some kind of grasp of its existence, but not of its essence. So that would be the Indian of Shoimin Esanire. Yeah, we'll be able to be able to grasp Shoimin, to hear what is normally seen. To hear the essence of something is not the usual way it works. Hearing is not grasping the essence of it. Seeing something is usually grasping the essence thereof. Hearing it is only hearing something that it does. It makes a noise. It is not a noise. It makes a noise, right? Then you would hear. But by Matan Torah, it didn't work like that. What was normally experienced as essence was graspable by them, but since it was a very high madrigal of essence, it was only graspable in shmiya, in understanding. Hearing and understanding, the same thing. But the Metzius, the existence thereof, was graspable. That it existed was graspable even in a way of re'iyah, even by one of by the higher koyach of re'iyah. Again, Metzius levad. Again, we only know that it's there. But seeing what is normally heard, that's seeing the essence of the or. Usually the essence we only hear about, we only can try to understand somewhat, but we don't see it, we don't grasp it directly. They grasp the essence directly. Vayorad Haval Har Sinai and Kol Ha'am Roim es HaKoilos. They saw the Koilos. V'Shomin es Anire, so the concept of Shomin es Anire, in other words, hearing what is normally seen, hearing the essence, what they grasped by B'Shmiya was the essence of the thing, the mahus of the thing, right? Okay. Meaning is arvus who shekol koyach and a mugdar b'mahusay dafka. And the concept of everything being melded together, or his arvus, that everything is mixed together, so to speak, is that shekol koyach and a mugdar b'mahusay, that no koyach is limited by what it is, dafka. And it's therefore possible for the or of chesed to be in the kli of gvura, or the or of gvura to be in the kli of chesed. That's what they place us. Why? Because the or itself is not mugdar at that madrega. As we explained it above, this whole concept of achlifu duchtayu, and that's because in the makor there is pshitus, and therefore they can swap around even in kalim later on. Whereas a yosim inyan is achdus, and that's even more than the inyan of his achdus. Achlifu duchtayu is more than inyan of his achdus. Why? Because the essence of the quality is able to be revealed in something which is its opposite. The or of chesed is able to be revealed in the clear gvura, which is even more than just simply the melding of the oros together in their source. Here, the essential source comes down into a kli. The or of chesed and the kli of gvura is something which is even, to a certain extent, higher than the way it is in the makor. Okay, so kitzer. Bira inyan hina es sefiros hagenuzos, hay mechinas iru his achtus. The es sefiros hagenuzos are all mixed together. Vagam shein hofchim b'musam, even though essentially they're opposites. Hina atzmim enam galus, because the atzmim are not actually revealed. They're not revealed on a lower madreg in the kli in with the tziyur. Therefore, eno nikar bahem hofchis. You can't see their opposite qualities in them. They're not actually a metzius yet. And therefore they can unite and melt together. And this is like ideas which are very theoretical. They don't really oppose one another. And as we explained, this is like the sort of mufshat seichel, a seichel which is on the madrega of oil. And also like the koches atzmim of the nefesh, aklulim be'etzem nefesh, all of them are there in etzem nefesh, and they don't oppose each other. And that's what happened in Matan Torah. Yurim and Nishma, they saw what was normally heard. They saw the mahus of ruchnius at the time of Matan Torah. And they heard esanira, what was normally seen. In other words, what was normally seen is only the Metzias, but here they had a soga, but not re'iyah in the mahus. They had a soga, a grasp, intellectual grasp of the mahus. Okay, so we'll stop here and we'll catch up on the note next time. If there are any questions, please feel free to ask. And I'll let you know during the week if I made another room or we could just use this room, I guess. It's not such a big deal. Same thing. Any questions? All right.
Question. Is there a correspondence between 3 levels of or and 3 types of oasis? Oasis ksif, oasis akhika, oasis akhika me'ever le'ever.
Yes. The Rebbe Maharash speaks about that in when he speaks about the Rishimu. Yeah.
Okay. And the lowest level corresponds to Kav, the middle level corresponds to sefiros hagenuzos, and the highest level it's Ayin Beis,
it's a or essentially. It's a or.
It's a or, yes. It's a or is Ayin Beis.
Yeah, it's essentially the Orein Sof. I mean, it's all Orein Sof if not Tzimtzum, but there's three madrigas in Orein Sof before the Tzimtzum. There's Etzema or, I mean, we distinguish them as 3 madrigas. Obviously, we wouldn't be able to perceive 3 madrigas there, but it's Etzema or Shvigilo Atzmoy, and Or Hashach Lo'olemis. That's where it would be. So Or Hashach Lo'olemis before it's Oilemis is already, that's the the shurish of the Kav. And the sefiros hagenuzos, and therefore that would be sort of oises hamachshava, and then oises hachakika would be the highest madrega, and then oises in between would be.
So it's higher than sefiros hagenuzos.
The lowest madrega is the sefiros hagenuzos. Yeah. In other words, oises hamachshava would be the sefiros hagenuzos. Yeah.
And what would correspond to oisech hakika? Etzema. Then what about hakika me'ever le'ever?
No, sorry. Okay, yeah. Oisech hakika me'ever le'ever is etzema or, and oisech hakika is just or shebegilu la'atzmai. Sorry about that.
Right, but in terms of Kav and in terms of sefiros hagenuzos, how does this correspond to those 3 levels?
Well, the shorish of a Kav, shorish HaKav is the sefiros hagenuzos. The sefiros hagenuzos b'ma'atzilam before the Tzimtzum. I'm not sure that. Right, that it corresponds directly to those 3 levels. I mean, Efsha, yeah, but The sefiros hagenuzos are in the or Ein Sof before the tzimtzum, but in the or hashayich la'olemus. And that's why there's sefiros then, because it's shayich la'olemus.
Okay, because I thought that the kaf is shaykh loelamas, but sefiros hagenuzos is higher madregas, so it's
it's the shorish of the kav. It's in the or in general, which is called or hashayich la'olemus. That's where the sefiros are. It's the tziyur of the or that's shaykh to the olemus.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions, Efsha? Yeah, okay. All right. Let's leave it at that then. Okay, call two, and we will meet hopefully again next week. Is next week Hanukkah or not yet? No, not yet. Next week's Chof Kislev.
No, not yet.
There may be a Farbrengen that night. I don't know. We'll see
Yes.
on Sunday night. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. If there is, then probably there won't be a class, but there will be. Okay, Zagazut.